to be ruler over us, And, Moses didn't grow up with them. He grew up in the Egyptian palace, and they probably had a bit of animosity towards him, a bit of jealousy towards him. Like, who do you think you are? You grew up in that palace? You haven't been down here in the dirt and the mud with us. So who are you to do anything for us or have anything to do with us? I think I found that even when we went to Israel, when we first went there, and we had not been there. We had not lived there for the last 20 years. Who are we to come in there and start saying anything or doing? What do we know? Nothing. We haven't been there. We haven't been through the wars. We weren't there before there was air conditioning and when they were living in tents and there was no showers and there was nothing in the desert. Where were we? We weren't there. Sort of like you had to pay your dues before you have anything to say to us. And I think there was a little bit of that there with Moses. Get down here and start laying some bricks with us before you can say something to us. But this also happened to Moses later, when God had called him, and they were coming out of Egypt, and they were marching through the wilderness. If you remember, it was the rebellion of Korah. Datam and Abiram and Korah, they started to stir things up, and they said, who do you think you are? Why do you think you're holy? The whole congregation is holy. Who are you to tell us anything? Who are you to lord it over us? Where this time Moses could say, it's up to God. Like, if God has called me, then he'll show you. And he did. God made Aaron's rod butt, and God showed, this is me. I have put you here. I have put you in this position of leadership. I have done this to Moses. He did not do this himself. So when God puts somebody in a position of leadership, he will keep them. But if they're doing it in their own strength, ahead of God's timing, forget it. So Moses had this dream. God has put a dream in each one of our hearts. We have to be willing to walk through this time in the wilderness, to allow God to shape our characters and to shape us and to mold us and to get all the pride out of us and all the self-confidence and the self-sufficiency. And we notice that when God went back, now Moses had to flee to the desert, which is the Midbar. So Moses runs away because he knows he's been discovered. And so he runs away to the wilderness, and he spends 40 years on the backside of nowhere. I think sometimes we think we're going to walk through the wilderness in, how long, 2 weeks? Long enough. Okay, God, I've been here long enough. 1 month now. 1 month. Listen, the bigger the call, the longer the wilderness. The bigger the dream, the longer the wasteland. The longer we're going to be in that place, because God's got to do a big work. He's got to do a deep work in us so he can use us. We've got to be broken. It's hard. It's painful. Sometimes we feel like we've just been put on a shelf and forgotten. I'm on the backside of nowhere doing nothing, and I am nothing. The interesting thing is, by the time God does call Moses, he's like, I can't do this, right? He goes, where am I? We go, okay, wait, I'm going to back up a little bit. Moses marries, he goes out into the wilderness, he comes to the Midianites, we're sort of distant kin relatives, and he marries Zipporah, the daughter of the Midianite priest. Zippor means a bird. I think this will be interesting. Just keep that in mind, all right? Zipporah is feminine of Zippor, is a bird. They have a son who they call Gershom. Ger is a stranger. Sham is there. Gershom. He's indicating that he had this son in the wilderness where he's a stranger. I was a stranger there. That's what his son's name means. The names in the Bible are very significant. It says that in Exodus 2:24 to 25, here's where God says, I hear you. It happened in the process of time that the king of Egypt died, and then the children of Israel groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out. And their cry came up to God because of their bondage. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and in my Bible it says God acknowledged them. In Hebrew, it says veyada otam. He knew them. This word, yada, it can mean knowing, as just in the sense, I know you. Oh yeah, I know you, I know you, I know you. But there's another sense where that word is used, as in a man knew a woman and she conceived and bore a child. It is a term of intimacy, intimate knowing. So God did not just say, oh yeah, I know them. Yeah, I know them. No, he's saying, I know them. And he knows us. Yada. Intimately, he knows our coming and our going. And I think sometimes when we're in this wilderness, we feel so forsaken. We feel that God does not hear us. We're crying out and we're crying out, and we feel like God doesn't hear us. He doesn't see us. He doesn't hear us. But it's not the truth. God may withdraw himself so that we don't sense his nearness and we don't hear his voice for a period of time in the wilderness. There is this silence. You know, I was just watching a cute movie called Miracle in the Second Lane, I think. Okay, I'm not sure about it, but it's about a little crippled boy who wants to be like his older brother, who plays sports and is a hero. Have you seen that movie? It's really cute movie. And in it shows that this boy, in his imagination, goes up to talk with God. And the little boy in his wheelchair, well, he has a hero who's a race car driver. I don't remember his name. I think he's actually a real race car driver, a very famous race car driver. And so in his imagination, he goes up to see God, and what you see is that God is tinkering on a car. Not God, but the race car driver is tinkering. You know, he's hunched over his car, tinkering in the engine in this big garage. And the little boy comes up and he says, God, you know, and he has this conversation with God, but it's the race car driver picture. And it's very cute, and God is not at all what we expect is this God. You know, he's very real and very approachable, and it's very cute. But at one point, this little boy, he's having such a hard time. I mean, he's crippled and he's failing at everything. He has spina bifida, I guess. And so he has also trouble with his gag reflex and stuff. And he goes to try and play baseball, and they won't let him on the team. And he ends up vomiting in the guy's face. And, you know, and he just this poor kid. And he's failing at everything. And then he ends up bursting into this guy's garage and spilling everything. And he goes up to see God. And he's saying, you know, God, I have defended you numerous times against the chaos theory, and you got to give me, I know you got a good plan, but you got to give me something more to go on here, because he couldn't see how is anything good going to come out of this, what's happening? How's anything good going to come out of the fact that he's crippled? And he's had like 21 surgeries to put a shunt in his head to drain off the fluid. God, how can this be good? But God doesn't answer. God doesn't answer. He says, God, you got to give me something to go on so I can, tell people. God doesn't answer. And at his lowest point, the very lowest point, the little boy goes up to see God in his imagination. And he's just calling. He says, God. He's up in the garage, but there's nobody there. It's just absolute silence. God. And you just see the cry of this little boy, and he just, where is he? That is sometimes how we feel when we are on our faces crying out to God. God, save me, rescue, deliver me. Lord, I can't take this anymore. And we hear nothing. Silence. Where's God? Even Job said, if I could just find you. God, I looked here and I look there and I look everywhere. But God, I can't find you. That's how it is in the wilderness. But this is what God says. It says he hears our cries. And he remembers his covenant. You see, it's not based on some kind of sentimental feeling. Because our feelings are very fickle, aren't they? One day we love, the next day we can't stand them. One day they're in our favor, the next day they bug us. It's not based on some kind of emotionalism. Our relationship with God is not based on how we feel. Our relationship with God is not based on what we do, if we've been good enough. It's not based on whether we sense his nearness or not, or hear his voice or not. Our relationship with God is based on covenant. And that's why we have to get a hold of the whole issue of covenant. That's why this is very important. God remembered his covenant. Are we in covenant with the God of Israel? Through the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua. Then we are the seed of Abraham. And we are in covenant. We can call upon that covenant. In Psalm 10, the psalmist said, "Why do you stand far off, Lord? Why do you hide in times of trouble?" Sometimes that's how it feels. God, where are you when I need you? Why are you hiding? Last week we sang, Kuma Adonai, get up, rise up, Lord, and come to my defense. I think sometimes God's just waiting for us to cry out to him and to call out to him and say, God, I need you, rise up. Rise up and come to my defense. I need you now. He wants to hear his children crying out to you. It says in verse 14, for you have seen, you observe trouble and grief. God does see when we are going through trouble. God does observe trouble and grief. He is not heartless like some people. God has a very soft heart towards us, but he also knows what we need. The helpless commits himself to you. You're the helper of the fatherless. He says to do justice to the fatherless and to the oppressed, that the man of the earth may oppress no more. So here is Israel under oppression, being oppressed by bondage in Egypt by the Israelites. And God says, he hears, I hear you. And so he goes to Moses. Now he goes to Moses. Covenant. God remembered his covenant. Just a couple more scriptures of covenant. There are a covenant that God made with David in Psalm 89. God says he remembers his covenant forever with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To you I will give the land. Over and over again, God repeats that the covenant that he made with the descendants of Jacob, Israel, is for the land. And we need to also stand by that and get out of some kind of sentimental, humanistic sort of worldview that about the whole Palestinian-Israeli issue. And just stand on the word of God. It's covenant. It's about covenant. God made a covenant that this land belongs to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not Ishmael and Esau. And that's the way it is. God blessed them, made them great, made them fruitful, gave them a lot of land, but not this land. And that's the way it is. So as people of God, we need to stand on that, and I really fear for the people that call themselves believers and will not stand on that word. And it's almost as if they're standing with the Egyptians. You know, where would they have stood there with Israel and the Egyptians when the 10 plagues hit? Would they have cried out that God is unfair? All right, God is God. He hears our cries of distress. He remembers his covenant. All right, and sometimes our lives become bitter because of the bondages that we are in. We can pray for God to hear our cries and to deliver us because of the covenant we have with Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, here's Moses has been in the desert for 40 years. And now he sees a burning bush that doesn't burn up. And he hears God calling him.